Okay, thank you so much, Leha and Anusha. So let's get into business and do some meditation together. Yeah. So just again start off as you always do in your meditation practice by just sitting comfortably, making sure you are nice and at ease. Meditation lasts for about half an hour or so. And then once you're nice and comfortable, make sure that you take a lot of time just to relax and find that ease of the body. And along with the ease of the body comes hopefully afterwards the ease of the mind as well. And just enjoy that feeling of leaving everything behind, just shutting your eyes, leaving out the world, and just going within, and let all of these burdens and difficulties in life, let them be. And now just enjoy the peace and the stillness inside instead. It doesn't take much to understand the burden of the world for the mind, and a little bit of just enjoyment of peace will take a long way in the meditation. And if you can, make sure you just go with the flow of things. There's nothing right or wrong in this stage of meditation. And when you go with the flow, when you don't judge, when you don't do, when you don't act, you're actually resting the mind. And it becomes peaceful merely by the fact that you go with the flow. And there is a lot of kindness and goodwill in a place like this. And see if you can feel some of those good, positive emotions and bring them into your mind, just to sharpen your mindfulness and bring a bit of brightness into your meditation here. It is so delightful when you can let go of the whole world and just rest in the present moment. Let everything be here, not caring for anything that is happening outside, and just enjoying the present moment. See if you can experience some of that joy. These are some of the strategies that make meditation really powerful and beautiful. So we're coming very close to the end of the meditation, and before we come to the end, just take a couple of moments to take stock of what has happened. And if you feel a bit more relaxed and at ease or mindful or whatever, ask yourself why that is the case.